What's going on, everyone? If you guys can give me a sound check by little chat.
I suppose I should say something as well to make sure
Yeah,
they
yeah,
can
that
they
way
can hear me.
yeah, make sure both of them they can hear both of us. You're coming through good on this end, Adam.
Okay, good. All
Thanks,
right.
Dan. Appreciate it. Hey,
Perfect.
Jerry from Virginia. Good sound. Hi, Greg.
All right. People are coming in.
Yeah, we'll give everyone a few minutes.
Hmm.
Hey, Oliver. Happy to have you. John, how you doing? Thanks, Dave.
The view will get better now. We'll take our faces off.
Yeah.
We'll get some good visuals.
Yeah, after the intro, the view will get much better.
All right, cool. I'm ready. I mean, I suppose we could get the introduction
Yeah, I'll go
out of
ahead
the
and
way because that's the boring stuff people don't care about.
that's true. We'll go ahead and get started because I want to be appreciative of everyone's time and especially Adam, who's joining us tonight. So some of you may have been to a few of these in the past that we've been doing over the last 6 months or so. Some of you guys may be new, but today is going to be awesome. You guys are going to learn to play some better golf, and we brought on a great guest. So before I introduce him, let me just introduce myself real quick. I'm Sean McConnon. I'm the founder of UpGlove. For those of you who are not familiar with UpGlove, we make golf gloves. We're a subscription-based service, and we make a soft, let me see, there we go, a soft top-grade Cabretta glove for about half the price that you would pay normally. We've been in business, well, we've been shipping for 2.5 years, been in business probably for a little bit over 3. I am a huge golf fanatic. I'm one of those people who are reading and watching videos basically all day on golf and tinkering with my swing probably way too much, but I'm hoping Adam's going to fix me tonight so I don't have to do that anymore. I'm a single-digit handicap, and that's basically about it. We're based in yeah, John, I appreciate that. Adam did try some.
I've tried them. I really like them a lot. I've started practicing more recently, and yeah, I like the gloves a lot, and I like the price. So I go through so many gloves that it's a good deal for me because even I hate, as a professional, I hate paying, exorbitant amounts for a glove that's going to get torn up.
Right, right. Um, so that's a little bit about me. We're based in Tampa, Florida. I live in Tampa, Florida. Originally from Cleveland, Ohio. My Browns are on tonight. We're going to whoop on the Ravens and go 10-3. Our guest today is Adam Young. For those of you not familiar with Adam Young, I think he's an Amazon and international bestseller. He wrote the book called The Practice Manual, The Ultimate Guide for Golfers. I believe that's what it's called. Is that right, Adam?
Yeah, it's actually up. Oh, up there.
Oh, there it is. There it is. Adam has coached at the Ledbetter Academies. He was also worked at Turnberry. Yes, that Turnberry.
Yep, the Turnberry. Yeah.
Yep. So that's amazing. And Adam has one of the best golfing blogs in the industry. He gets over 1 million views on his blog a year. And he's one of the brightest minds in golf. So we're definitely all
Don't explode my head too much. I present in a moment.
We're definitely fortunate to have him join us. And
it's a pleasure to be on, I suppose.
yeah, thanks, Adam. And Adam, just real quick before we go ahead and get into the presentation, why don't you tell us like a little bit about like your coaching background?
Yes, I would consider myself at the moment it's so hard to say, a simple coach. a simplistic. Yeah, I don't. I can go really in depth, and I'm actually gonna show you some of that in this presentation. I'll take you down a road that you'll start to build your knowledge, and you'll go, oh, this is getting a little bit too in depth, and then all of a sudden I'll rein it back into something really simple. Because that's kind of how coaches or most coaches operate. We learn more and more about it. We learn about everything from the brain, psychology, motor learning, as well as just how the swing functions from a movement perspective. But we often have so much in-depth knowledge, but we can't give all that to everybody on the lesson tee. We often have to say something very simple that's going to get them to hit it better instantly and last as well. And so, hopefully at the end of that, you'll get educated, but you'll also get something nice and simple to take away from this. Thank you,
Awesome.
Bernard.
That's awesome. So, well, with that being said, I'm sure everyone's raring to go. Why don't you kick us off and start telling us how we can play some better golf?
Yeah, I'm just going to share my screen. All right. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So the biggest part of my philosophy surrounds or is about impact. It's the most important part of the swing. If someone has to say which is the most important part of the swing, you can't really deny that it's impact. And so here we see a video of Rory McIlroy. We see the club coming into impact, and then we see the ball struck here, and then we've got one, two, maybe 3 or 4 frames where the club is in contact with the ball, and then the ball leaves the face. And so everything that ball does is a result of that little part in space. There's 4 frames or so. So from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe even less than that. I mean, the ball separates pretty quickly. So I mean, there are lots of things that the ball that takes from the club face in terms of information. We could say things like the loft of the club at impact. So that determines a lot of the launch, and we can actually see the ball fly off here, and it's perfectly matched up with the loft there. So the loft determines the majority of the launch angle. We have some other things like the angle of attack. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of angle of attack, so I'll give you a basic of that. If I just draw a dot on the top of the club head there, and draw another dot a few frames later. So we could say roughly this club has about an 8 or 9 degree angle of attack into the ball. I think that was a wedge he's hitting. So there's loft, angle of attack. We have the speed that the club is moving as well. So all else being equal, the faster club heads are going to produce bigger distances. And we have the club face direction. So whether the club face is pointing more to the right or to the left. Hard to do that from this angle. What else do we have? We have where we strike on the face, and you can see a few frames later here, you have where the club enters the turf. So the ground contact. So lots of players, they think that hitting the ground is a bad thing. It's not. You can see that McIlroy hits the ground so much here that shaft, that club shaft actually has quite a significant bend to it. So the pros will hit the ground pretty hard, and look at the size on that divot. And it's not
Huge.
necessary to take a huge divot, but it doesn't really matter the size of the divot because it comes after the golf ball. You can see the ball is struck first, then the divot happens. So the divot is irrelevant because by the time that club has entered the turf there, that ball has already left the face. It's already received all of the information that it needs to. The problem many amateurs have is they obviously hit the ground too early. They hit the ground first in a fat shot, or they don't hit the ground at all in a thin shot or a bladed shot or even a topped shot. So yeah, ground contact is very, very important, as is face contact. So I think we got most of the ball flight laws. There are 7 ball flight laws, or 7 impact laws, I should say. So 7 bits of information that the ball receives from the club face at impact. So yeah, if I was to summarize that for you, I would say this yellow area is the most important part of the golf swing. Anything you do whether you lift your arm up steeper, whether you flex your wrist, whether you take a different grip, whether you swing harder or softer, it will only influence the result in as much as it influences that yellow space there. And so this ball can't see that that's McIlroy. You can't see it. The ball doesn't care. The ball doesn't care where that player was at the top of their swing or what grip they have here. I mean, those things might influence impact, but the ball doesn't know that. And so it's just an important thing to remember. For me, it was a light bulb moment. But for many of you, you might know it, but maybe you don't live by it as much. So in order to contact the ground in the right place, or that we're going to talk about two main things here. We're going to talk about face contact and ground contact. And so ground contact, if you think of the swing as a circle around your body, or circular, ellipse shape, whatever you want to call it, it's round-ish. You have a part of that arc, the red part where the club is traveling down. Then you have a white part of that arc where it's leveling out. And then you have the blue part of the arc where it's traveling back on the upswing again. And so the white part of the arc, we would call that low point, the low point of the swing circle. And so with a professional, as we saw with McIlroy, what happens is the club should come down or should be traveling on the downward part of the arc. It then strikes the ball. The ball leaves the face, and then the club enters the turf. In the vast majority of shots, where the ball is resting on the turf, that will be the case. The times where that's not the case is with a putter. Obviously, you don't want to take a chunk out of the green, and with a driver. But even with a long iron off the turf or a hybrid off the turf, you will probably be doing something like this. You might not dig in as much with a hybrid because it's a much fatter sole to it.
Right.
And so bringing the ball back into play, that's what it looks like. The lowest point of the swing is actually in front of the golf ball. Now, it can be in front different amounts. It could be maybe half an inch in front, 2 inches in front. With pros, with a 7-iron, it can be as much as 4 inches in front of the golf ball. So I think that's about average, about 4 inches in front of the golf ball. So that club is traveling on the downward part of the arc. So whenever we say hit down on the ball, I don't necessarily like that phrase, hit down, because it can kind of ruin the movement a little bit. I prefer to think of getting the low point further ahead of the golf ball. So that actually takes care of the downward part of the strike. So all pros have their low point in front like that. But that's not enough, unfortunately. In order to strike the ground in the right place, that's not enough. You also have to control your arc depth. So there's a second component. So think of arc depth as the up and down motion of the club, or the up and down motion of the hula hoop, the circle. So I've got this little visual here. So this is the case. This is a pro low point. This is exactly what we see McIlroy do. But if he were to accidentally drop half an inch or so into the ground, you can see that affects low point as well. Or that affects, the ground contact. So you can see now with the drop in height, that ground contact is shifted back. And it's actually one of the more important things in golf. We hear, I think some of your more advanced golfers will have already heard of low point, but they might not have heard of arc depth. And that's actually more important, because you can see a small drop in height can actually result in a very significant drop or change in ground contact. And the reverse would be true as well. If we were to raise that arc back up, you change the low point, you tend to move the ground contact forwards. And sometimes we can raise the arc depth so much that we start to thin the ball. So any thins or fats might be a result of low point issues or arc depth issues. I told you this would get complicated. Don't worry, I'm going to rein it back in a little bit. But it's all about striking ball first, then turf. And there are two components to that: how deep you go in and where your low point position is. It gets way more complicated than that, actually. Now, with low point, so we could move the low point back and forwards. Low point could move around like that, back and forwards. And those things can be influenced by things such as weight shift. So, if you were to shift your weight towards the target more aggressively, you'd probably move your low point further forwards. And if you had your weight on your back foot, like many amateurs, you'd probably have your low point further behind the ball. And so we want to get that low point or that weight shift nicely in place so our low point is in a good place. So weight shift relates to it. Our release weights relates to it as well. So whether we release early or later, you don't need to pay attention to these things. I'm just telling you how complicated or how complex it is.
Right.
And we even have swing direction can influence low points. So if someone swings to the left, an over the top player, that will actually move the low point forwards. And if someone swings excessively from in to out, that will move the low point back. So all these factors go into play. Now with arc depth, there are hundreds of things that relate to it. So you could drop down or up from your knees flexing or straightening, even your ankles flexing or straightening. So some people jump up on their toes and that can change the depth that you go in. If your spine, any one of the vertebrae going up or down in movement can change that. You could have your shoulder retracting or protracting, moving back and forth in the socket. That can change it. Whether your shoulders are open or closed will change it. Whether your lead arm is flexed or extended, so straight or bent, will affect it. So it becomes to the point where it's like, oh my God, this is impossible. How do I control all of these things? How on earth am I going to control all these things? And that's the issue that many amateurs find themselves in, because they try to control one variable. So they say, right, I'm going to take out one variable. I'm going to straighten my arm and keep it straight throughout the swing. Well, the problem is that's only one variable that relates to arc depth. You could have a poker straight arm throughout the swing and still your knees flex or extend a little bit too much, and all of a sudden you've hit it 6 inches behind the ball.
Too much right side bend or trail side bend, anything, right?
Exactly. And these things can all change as well. I mean, I'll actually bring up a video of Tiger Woods. So this is a great visual. This is in 2001 when he was the best player in the world. And I'm going to show you his head height. So he starts here. He swings back, maintains his head height pretty well, but then he has this huge squat. I mean, he's just dropped about 6 inches there. And then he reverses it from here into impact. He actually jumps up a little bit and extends upwards. And so the best players in the world are actually moving up and down a little bit. And so it's really strange. It's like, well, how is he doing that? Well, the beauty is there is a simplistic answer to this. Like I said, I'm gonna make it really difficult for you or give you the complexity, and then I'm gonna rein it back in and make things simple. And so the simple thing would be literally just to focus on where you contact the ground. So I got a little video clip here, and this is a drill I do with all my players. It's more of a feedback exercise, and you can do this on the course as well. So when you're on the course, as long as it's not a competition, you can place a tee on the ground, or sometimes I'll get players to just place a coin on the ground or a marker, something just to tell you where the golf ball was in space before you hit it. And then all you do is you swing back, hit the shot, and you can see where your divot started. It's as simple as that. And you can see this divot started around about here. So basically pros will start the divot anywhere between about 1/2 inch or 1/4 of an inch behind and 1/4 of an inch in front, something like that, or 1/2 an inch behind, 1/2 an inch in front. That's the safe zone. Now, if you were to start to hit a little bit in front of it, maybe 1/2 an inch in front, further forwards, or 1/2 an inch farther back from that, that's where we start to get slight fat shots and thin shots. So we might lose about 5-10 yards distance from that. And then we get into disaster areas. So anything in this area is going to be a bladed shot. It's actually very rare that someone contacts the ground that far forwards. But certainly you see amateurs all the time contact the ground in this area here. 1.5 inches, 2 inches, 3 inches behind. And so I can almost predict what handicap a player is based on just looking at that.
Right.
If I looked at 100 shots of a player or even 10 shots, and they're getting 90% of their shots striking that yellow area, I would say that guy's probably either a pro or scratch handicap. They're going to be low handicap. If 90% of their shots fall within the orange area or the dirty brown area, that's going to be probably a single figure handicap. And then if 90% of their shots fall in the red area, that's going to be a much higher handicap. Or say only 30% of their shots fall in the orange area, you're probably talking about a 15 handicap, something like that. So many golfers will start to hit in the red area, and eventually they learn to take the shallowest divot ever. So they're basically getting away with it then. So if you hit the red area and you take a real thin divot, you can get away with it, but it's not optimal. It's not what the pros do. The pros take pretty chunky divots and they just make sure that it's in front of the ball like that.
Right.
Or it starts in that yellow area. Does that make sense so far?
Yep. Good
So
here.
basically you're taking all that complexity, the up and down motion of your body, the low point motion as well, so the side to side motion, and instead of focusing on all of those parts that relate to it, I would rather give the person the single goal of striking that line where the ball is resting. So I often actually spray a white line on the ground with Dr. Scholl's foot spray or any kind of foot spray, maybe dry shampoo. I'll spray a line on the ground. I'll place golf balls on top, and we just work on making the divot in the right place.
So, Adam, would you say it's better for, let's just say, most golfers, most amateur golfers, to focus on achieving the result versus worrying about technical aspects?
Exactly, yes. Like, you don't put a fork into your mouth thinking of where your arm is, where your wrist is, or what your shoulder angle is, right? You focus on the task. The task is to put the fork in the mouth. And the same in golf as well. There are lots of examples of this in other sports as well. They take darts players and they ask them to focus on the arm movement, and it completely screws up their ability to throw a dart. Whereas when they focus on the task, getting the dart where they want it to, they get better results with it. And it's the same with this. Focus on the task being to strike that line, or you might give them a bigger boundary. You'd say strike anywhere between these 3 lines, ideally on that middle one. Strike anywhere there, and you're golden. And I even quantify it. So the next stage for people is not just to do the task, but to actually make a game out of it. I would, play a game where we write down how far behind the ball they hit each time. So say they make one swing and they hit an inch behind. I would say, okay, you scored 1. Then the next one they hit 2 inches behind. I'll say, okay, you scored 2 on that one. Then the next one they hit the line. I'd say, okay, you scored 0 on that. So after 10 shots, we get a score. And then we can get an average. And I've had players who, when they first start, they're hitting on average 2 inches behind the ball. And they're a 15, 20 handicap. And then I get them to practice that drill over and over and over. And after a month, all of a sudden, they're only an inch behind on average. And now they're in single figures. And that's all they've done. Now, there are obviously other things that we can do to speed this up. But focusing on the task is huge. And I think most golfers get caught in the trap of focusing on the method, not the task. So they're busy.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, you asked
I'll raise my own hand on that.
Exactly. So if I just took a random sample of golfers on the tee and asked them what their swing thoughts were, they would 90% of them, if not 99, would say, I'm thinking of left arm or shoulder movement or weight shift. They're thinking on the method, about the method, rather than the task of what they're trying to achieve. And like I said, if you just stuck to this task, basically you're giving your brain one goal: hit the ground in the right place, and your brain will figure out. It takes all of the moving pieces that contribute to it, and it figures out how to make them work together. Whereas when you focus on one piece of the movement, such as weight shift, your brain will figure out how to get better at weight shift, but all the other pieces won't fall into line. And this has been shown in the science, in the motor learning science. This is why these are becoming more and more
Um,
popular.
I
So
got you. You know what? That was, you were talking kind of like about a light bulb moment. That's kind of a light bulb moment that I just had there. So if you're focusing on two or three things, let's just say, you might get better at those two or three things. But back to the beginning of your presentation, there's almost infinite amount of things that are happening with your body moving.
exactly.
And essentially you lose kind of what those, or you can't necessarily control all those things and think about these main three things, and then you lose that, and then ultimately that impacts the result anyways.
Exactly. I mean, the simplest analogy is the studies on throwing a ball into a bucket. If a player is just focusing on throwing the ball into the bucket, they will do it more often, and they'll actually be able to do it in different ways. They could throw it higher, throw it a little lower, throw it harder, throw it softer. Doesn't matter. They'll get the ball into the bucket more often. Whereas when you ask those same people to focus on their wrist motion and try to make that more consistent, the wrist motion might become more consistent, but their outcomes get less consistent. It's really it's a counterintuitive thing, but it makes sense, at least in terms of throwing a ball into a bucket. I'm sure many people can connect to that. But either way, there's about 18 years of research on this now in the motor learning science that show that task-based focuses like this, as long as the feedback is very, very clear, they will get better at it. So practicing with good feedback and a clear understanding of what the task is, they will get better at it. And if you turn it into a game, you get better quicker. So if you do a 10 ball test and you get your average and you repeat that every single time you practice for a month, you will see that average come down. And as a result, that those scores will come down as well, because they have to. If you strike the ground better, you're going to be a better golfer. It's as simple as that.
Well, and it's, like just from a practical like standpoint, like how many times do you see like one of your buddies, or maybe even if it's you hit a fat shot, then you're all mad, and then it just ruins that hole, and it becomes a blow up hole anyways.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. Someone will hit a bad shot and then they start thinking about their swing, and then it's a downward spiral.
Right.
Or, if you've ever been on the first tee and someone says, "Oh, I like what you do with your swing. You look good in the top of your backswing." All of a sudden, he's inside your head and you're thinking about the top of your backswing, and you screw up for the rest of the round.
I'm going to start using that.
And you know what? The difference between your best shots and your worst shots, if I go back to that arc depth, it's very common that all you've done, if this is a perfect swing here, well, look, if you were to drop just, what's that, an eighth of an inch, all of a sudden you hit an inch and a half behind it, and that's a fat shot effectively, and you've dropped an eighth of an inch. That could have come from anywhere. Some knee flex, some head drop, some scapular retraction, some left arm flex, an earlier release. Could have come from anywhere. You'd drive yourself nuts trying to find which one it was. But
Right.
instead of doing that, just give your brain the goal. Say, okay, I went a little too deep into that. And we'll talk about this in a moment, how to actually change those. And I use a lot of psychological things, as, basically this drill here is a psychological thing. You're just telling your brain what you want to do, using good feedback and adjusting from there. And it's the same with face strike. So face strike, you could have the heel side, which is this side here. You have the toe side, which is the far side. And I've split it into thirds here. So actually, one of the games I play with people is to get them to intentionally hit the toe and the heel and the center, which is really counterintuitive. When people first hear that, they go, what are you going on about? You must be mad. You can't be a teacher. But I've actually got studies on this backing up that if I ask a group of golfers to hit all thirds of those intentionally versus a group who only hits the center intentionally, when we go to test, the ones who did all three are actually better at hitting the center. Really counterintuitive. So it's that old mantra of perfect practice makes perfect is absolute rubbish. The most British phrase I'll say here. It's not. It's just not true. There's a whole science called differential learning where you can practice doing the wrong thing, and as long as it's intentional, you can learn quicker. So another version of this is trying to present the face more open or closed at will, and intentionally hitting hooks and slices. That actually helps you when it comes to hitting a straight shot, because if you know what right feels like, and you know what left feels like, a centered shot is just something in between there. It's just calibrating that feeling. And so,
Real quick, Adam, there's a couple questions here
yeah, sure.
from the two Johns here. So one of them was asking, what about a mental game, like don't miss right or don't hit into the water?
Yeah.
Or instead, we should maybe think hit a toe shot or count to 10 as you swing, or what? Like, what are some things maybe, I guess, that they can do while they're playing?
Oh man, I mean, you could do a whole presentation on that. So say you're the type of person who gets distracted or fearful. There's loads of ways around that. I mean, you could just place your focus on something that's relevant, right? Rather than don't do X, you could focus on something you actually control, which is let's focus on hitting this spot on the ground. You know, if a place a spot where the golf ball is, let's focus on hitting that spot. Or let's focus on which part of the face I'm hitting. So I'll basically just play a game of do the opposite of what my pattern is. So, you know, the other day I woke up and I was accidentally hitting out the toe. No biggie. I just try and hit out of this third, and it balances it, it neutralizes it, and it gives me a focus then. So I'm not worried about don't do this with the ball or that with the result. I'm just focusing on what I can control, which is my intention. There are more esoteric ways as well. Like I do have a counting routine. I have a blog on that where I get players to walk into their shots and they're counting. And what it does is it basically distracts your conscious mind away from irrelevant thoughts and places it it places on something that's called a neutral focus. And what happens for players, if I did that with 100 golfers, get them to focus on breathing or counting, what happens is their patterns become more consistent. Now, not necessarily better, right? A shanker might become more consistently shanking it, which is not a good thing. But if you're a good player and you have relatively good patterns, you will more likely produce those patterns. So that's good when you have a player who's good, but they crumble under pressure, right? Because they self-sabotage.
Right.
I'm a good example of that as well. I don't deal with pressure very, very well. I'm an introvert. So I do a counting routine when I feel like I'm under pressure. But that might not necessarily help a shanker. You know, a shanker is someone hitting out of this part of the club. What might help the shanker is to focus more on hitting the toe third of the club, because that would neutralize their pattern.
Right.
So, yeah, go on.
I was going to, the other John asked a question about how could he, practice this in the winter on a mat?
I will show you that in a moment.
Awesome.
But there are drills you can do. So one of the drills, turning this into a psychological thing. You can do this with irons as well as driver, but I've got a can of Dr. Scholl's, or I think this is a CVS brand foot spray because I'm cheap. They're about $3 a can or something. And you just do a really light spray on the face. I did a little bit more. I caked it on a bit more just so you can see it. Within a couple of seconds, it dries into a white powder. And basically, you make your swing and strike the ball, and it tells you where you struck on the face. So it's great feedback. And then as an addition to that, if that's all you did, you would improve at that. If that's all you did is just spray the face and hit balls, and every time you hit a ball, have a look down and see where you struck, you would get better over time. But if you want to speed it up, do an exercise where you hit 10 balls trying to hit the toe portion of the club. Then do another 10 shots trying to hit the heel of the club. And then do your 10 shots trying to hit the center. And you will find you will be better at it. And whichever one you struggle with, everybody will struggle with one of those. If you struggle with the yellow area, that's what you need to practice more. It's really simple. And so obviously you don't want to do this on the course because you don't want to be hitting the incorrect parts of the face on the course, but you can do this on the range, or even if you're at home and you can't get to a range at the moment, you can do this without a ball and it still leaves the mark of the tee. You'll see a little dot here, or I should put it in a different color, a little dot here, which represents the tee. Or you could use little Coke bottle caps and that mushes against the face a little better. Or you could use a foam ball as well. So
Right.
there are ways of transferring this to indoor practice. And so it's a great drill. If you did this over winter, just 5 minutes a day, you would come out a better golfer than you left, definitely.
Right. Awesome.
So yeah, so there's the tee and divot drill. That's a little bit harder to do indoors, but I'll show you a way of doing it now. There's the face spray drill that you can use with irons as well. And if you want, I've just partnered with a training aid guy who invented this. He actually contacted me because I'm the strike guy in the golf industry. And so he contacted me saying, I love what you do. I think your product would be a good fit. So this is kind of a plug for his stuff, but I love it. This is a board with little sequins on it. And as you swing, let me play it through full speed. As you swing, it leaves a mark. It tells you where you've hit. So you can see that's in the orange area, right? Where I put earlier. That's slightly ahead of the golf ball. So it's slight thin contact. And then we have, I don't know what this one is. We'll see in a moment. All right, that is too close to your feet. So can you see how the divot is more on this line here?
Right.
So it's too close to your feet. So that relates to a toe contact, which I'll go through in a moment. I'll explain that concept. And this one was behind the ball. I hit too early, kind of in the orange, maybe red zone there. So that would be a fat contact. And so, yeah, it's just, and that's a perfect contact then. So this is what you ideally want to do. That's a pro contact where you're striking that yellow spot where the ball was resting initially. So this is a great way. You can go to divotboard.com if you want that. If you want to have a look at that, or type adamyounggolf.com/divotboard. And I've got an article showing that. But that's a great way of practicing that in winter or even summer. I mean, if you're on the range mats, right? On a range mat, you will get away. If you hit 2 inches behind it on a range mat, you'll get away with it.
I hate it.
Lots of people, yeah, exactly. Lots of people practice on range mats and they walk off going, oh, I feel good about today. Then they hit their first shot on the turf and they fat it. It chunks about 10 yards and they think, why can't I transfer my game from the range to the course?
Right.
Well, it could be you're just getting incorrect feedback. If you've got this device, all right, a fat shot might still fly off, okay, but you'll know it because you can see it now. It won't let you cheat.
Right.
It is quite expensive, the divot board. It's about $99. I do have an offer on it at the moment, which includes my educational program. So if you're thinking about getting it, get it within this month because there's extras. But a cheaper version of this would be, let me have a look here, the sand drill. So you can get into a bunker and just draw a line in it and make sure the sand's nice and flat. I actually rake it with the back of the rake to make sure it's flat. And then just make your swing. And what you'll see is you can see two things basically, or three things. Number one, you can see in yellow, the yellow dot here is where I first contacted the ground. So a little bit behind, but nothing too bad. You can also see the arc depth because the depth of the divot that you go in tells you a story. And you can also see the low point of the swing because the middle of the divot represents the lowest point of your swing in sand. So that gives you all the information. I mean, obviously, the most important part of that information is where you first contacted the ground. But you know, it's nice to know, oh, my divot is 3 inches in front, which is pretty pro-like. So it gives you a lot of information. It's just really good to see all that because I can use that with players and we can calibrate everything. I can make them go in a little deeper, a little shallower. I can shove their low point further forwards or back. And then obviously we can look at that ground contact. So that's the cheap version of it.
Gotcha.
Now,
Great.
Yeah, in terms of changing these things, we've talked about feedback devices. This is a bit blurry, unfortunately, but you'll get the point here. Now, imagine you are looking down at the ground And this white circle is a bit blurry, but this is the golf ball basically. So this circle here is the golf ball. You're looking at the ground. Now, if I asked 100 golfers to aim for this little little red spot instead of the golf ball and try to hit that little red spot, what would happen is their strike would move a little bit more towards the toe. And if I ask them to aim for this bigger red spot, it would move even more towards the toe. And then if I asked them to aim for this really big red spot, they would probably toe shank it, or definitely move more towards the toe. And the reverse is true. If I ask them to aim for the yellow spots, the strike would get progressively more towards the heel of the club. So this is a kind of the basic way that I train golfers to be able to hit different parts of the face. And we first start with little putting swings until they've got control over it. And then we build up. And what I have is I have players who train this to the point where they can move the strike around the face at will in 3 millimeter increments, because I have a GC quad, so I can quantify it in millimeters. So I could ask some of my players, I could say, can you hit it 3 millimeters towards the toe for me? And they'll get it pretty close. I'll say, can you hit it 6 millimeters towards the toe? They'll get it pretty close. I can give them loads of different numbers and they can feel it because they've trained these skills. And now you might think, well, why on earth would you want to hit it on different parts of the face? Well, here's why. Because when it comes back to trying to hit that center of the face, your ability to move it back and forth at will helps you. So those guys who are able to move it at 3 millimeter increments, when I ask them to hit the center now, it is not a problem. In fact, I have quantifiable data showing that the players who practice those skills of moving it around the face, they get better at hitting the center. You know, they might only hit, say they hit 80 out of 100 on the center pre-test. After doing these skill drills, they might hit 90 or 95 out of the center. Right. So it's really counterintuitive training, but it's why I'm different. It's why my book was a bestseller, because loads of people read it and they went, oh, wow, I didn't even think of this stuff. This is really strange, but let's go out and try it. And oh my God, it works. Let's give the book a good review. So I appreciate all those good reviews, by the way. So yeah, doing that, just, you know, shifting side to side mentally. If someone is hitting fat shots, I might tell them to hit, you know, this orange one, or a bigger orange one, or an even bigger orange one. So sometimes I'll take the ball away and we just explore. Can you hit 3 inches in front of it? Can you hit 2 inches in front of it? Can you hit 2 inches behind the ball intentionally? And initially, people are awful at it. They can't get anywhere near where they try to. You know, they might try to hit the ball and they end up hitting back here. But you know what? When I get people to explore hitting too far in front and too far behind, all of a sudden their ability to hit their desired spot where the ball is resting improves. So, and you can even work on this in the up and down motion as well. So if you imagine you're an ant now, again, it's a bit blurry, but you're an ant, and this green line here is actually a blade of grass. I've just taken all the other blades of grass away, so you're just looking at one blade of grass. I could ask players to, can you hit the top of the blade of grass, so that biggest blue spot there? And then I say, can you go a little deeper and just hit, you know, somewhere around here? Now, can you hit the middle of the blade of grass? Now, can you hit the base of the blade of grass? Can you take a little bit of turf? Can you take a big amount of turf? And what I find is players are actually really good at that. Even complete beginners can control their up and down motion. Again, not by thinking about how to do it. They're not thinking of flexing the lead arm, straightening the legs, or scapular retraction, protraction. They're not thinking about that. They're just telling their brain which part of the grass they want to hit, and they're adjusting it up and down. Just a game of higher, lower. That's all it is. And players, if they do that game enough, they become very, very good at it. And that helps when it comes to this skill, which is the up and down motion that I talked about.
Right.
So if I have a player who is fatting it, they're going in a bit too deep and they're hitting 3 inches behind, I might tell them, can you feel as if you nip the top of the blades of grass for me? And all of a sudden, boop, the arc goes up and the ground contact gets better. So a lesson with me can often look stupidly simple.
Right.
Someone could be paying me $200 an hour. It's almost embarrassing me for me to take that money, but people, the market pays it, and they pay me $200 an hour for me to say, "Can you just brush the grass or feel like you brush the grass?" But you know what? Their results get better, and they
Right.
walk off happy. They're like, "You know what? I've tried everything. I've been reading all the magazines. I've been doing this and that with my body, and nothing's fixed it. And now all I'm thinking of is just brushing the top of the grass, and it's better." I'm like, "Yep." And if you understand what you're doing, and if you learn how, hitting different parts of the blade of grass affects your outcome and your ground strike, you can effectively coach yourself. So, okay, it was an expensive lesson, but now you can coach yourself for life. So long term,
Right.
it's really cheap. And if you don't want to pay $200 an hour, I have online programs that are very cheap. So you can get all of this information for much cheaper.
And so like for that drill that you were just talking about, they could probably just put a tee in the ground and practice like hitting the tee.
Exactly. Yeah, you could if you're indoors, you're stuck indoors. Something I do is I get an old bit of carpet, it's a tiny square of carpet, and I place guitar picks on top of it. And the goal is to clip the guitar pick away without moving the carpet too much.
Wow.
So that basically automatically gives your brain the task. I've got to control my height here. And if you go too high, even by a couple of millimeters, you're not going to move the guitar pick. And if you go too deep, you're going to send the carpet flying out. So
Right.
over time, after practicing this, obviously it's really difficult at first, that drill. But after doing it, you get better at it. You can feel it. And you can, if you can do that task of hitting a guitar pick without sending the carpet out there, you will never fat or thin it again. It's that simple.
Wow.
And if you want a simpler version of that, something that's easy and not as frustrating, just start with a bottle cap, a Coke bottle cap on top of the carpet. Same task, clip the bottle cap out without moving the carpet. Once it gets too easy for you, shift to something thinner, like a guitar pick or something in between those. So yeah, that's again a simple drill. It just deals with intention. It deals with the one thought process that allows your brain to figure out all the variables. And yeah, I think that's pretty much my presentation. So I will go back to seeing you.
Yep.
Turn off my screen share. So yeah, I mean,
I wanted to real quick, and we're going to open it up for Q&As, guys, here in 1 second. Pierre asked a question earlier. I didn't get a chance to ask that, but he was asking if is it easier to be a sweeper versus a digger for the best shot result? But it just sounds like you're saying don't even focus on those things. Just focus on kind of hitting like in front of the ball or for good contact, face contact.
yeah, contacting that. So hold on a second. So this was the device, the divot board here. So yeah, contacting that, the yellow spot there, just contacting that. Whether you dig in deep, basically, and hit it hard, or whether you just lightly touch that yellow spot is less relevant. In fact, both can work. I like players to be picky. If they're okay with that, they can, pick it off that turf. If I have a higher speed player, I will tell them, hit this yellow spot, but take a divot after it. So go in a bit deeper. Basically try and thump that yellow spot. Because what that does is it tends to get more forward shaft lean, and so that player can bring their flight down. And if they're a lower speed player, then I say just bounce the club on that yellow spot, basically.
Right. And I know we probably we didn't necessarily target it off, but I think a lot of this whole presentation, and feel free if you want to add here something, Adam, about the skill versus technique. This is kind of what we're talking essentially is you're building skills by doing these simple drills versus getting too focused on positions and technique.
Yeah, so I would define technique as the method employed to achieve a task.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, how do you hit that yellow spot? Well, I could give you a million combinations of how to hit it, and you can look at the tour players to see all the different ways that they achieve that. You know, some players have more weight shift and less lag. Some players a little bit more on the back foot and use more leg. I mean, I could go down loads of different routes with that. Most tour players end up looking similar because they're using a model that's based on doing it at speed as well. So lots of things that people lord over, you know, oh, look, a huge shoulder turn. That's kind of just relevant to speed creation. It's not really relevant to whether you hit the ground in the right place.
Right.
So, yeah, the technique is the method employed, but the skill is the task, right? How good are you at hitting that yellow spot?
Right.
Because I'm very skilled, I can actually hit that yellow spot in a million different ways. I can do it and look pretty stock like a pro, or I could do it on my back foot, swinging more left. I could do it more forward, swinging more right. I could grip the club like this and hit the yellow spot. And you know what? As stupid as that grip is, that ball flies off just as if it would with any other swing. And that's
Right.
often something I use to show people the difference between technique and skill. I say to people, you know, what is a must thing in the golf swing? And they say, oh, well, you absolutely must have a good grip. And so I just grip it like an idiot and just flush shots over and over down there. And I say, all right, so that's out of the window. Give me another must. And they say, oh, well, you have to follow through. And then I do what I call my old man swing, which is I
Right. Right.
like that, and still I just pummel these balls down there. All right, I might lose 10 yards or so, but
Right.
I
Right.
pummel these balls down there. And at the end of about 20 minutes of saying all these musts, they go, you know what? I haven't got a clue anymore. My world has been shattered. Tell us, what is a must? And I say, well, number one, you must hit this yellow spot. No matter how you do it, whether you want to do it like a tour player or whether you want to do it like an octopus falling out of a tree, ball doesn't care. A la Jim Furyk, ball doesn't care. Just hit this spot. If you do that, you basically take care of ground contact and face contact, which are two of the most important fundamentals. So, you know, going back to that board again, if you hit the right spot, you're taking care of ground contact and face contact, because if you hit too much on this yellow line, that's basically like a heel contact, and too much on this yellow line is like a toe contact. I believe I'm doing things backwards here because the camera is all backwards, but basically hitting the ground in different places affects face contact as well. So I can give a person that one goal of hit this spot, and if they've got good quality feedback like that divot board or some other feedback like the spray and the line on the
Right.
ground, they'll get better at it, and they won't have to know exactly how to do it.
Right. Greg was asking a drill to stop the S word with the wedges.
You know what? The drill that I have such a good success rate with shankers, because I've had so many people come to me who are on the edge of quitting. They say, I've just spent $1,000 with lessons and I still shank it. I say, so what have you been working on? They go, well, one guy told me I need to turn my shoulders. The other's trying to fix my over the top move. And I say, well, okay, that's all relevant. Or it might be nice stuff to fix, but just entertain me for a moment. And I say, I spray the club face and I say, right, I want you to try with a putting swing and hit the toe of the club. And I just let them hit 10 shots. And then we have a look. Sometimes they're on the toe, sometimes they're not. If they're not, I give them that spot drill. Remember where I tell them to look at different spots, and I tell them to look at the yellow spots, which are closer to their feet. Right. And I say, right, try again now and just do a little chipping swing, a little putting swing, trying to hit that yellow spot. And it shifts towards the toe. Once they can get to about a 9 out of 10 success rate, then I say, all right, now do it with a pitching swing. And then again, once they can hit the toe half of the club 9 out of 10 times, we go to a full swing. And you know what? Sometimes they go, well, Adam, I still struggled to hit the toe. Look, I only hit 6 out of 10 on the toe. And I say, yeah, how many shank shots have you hit in the last hour? And they go, oh, shit, I haven't shanked it in the last hour. I go, yeah, exactly. The intention of doing the opposite of your fault neutralizes your pattern. And so I say, right, I want you to go off now. And for 5 minutes minimum every single day, I want you to practice that drill. Not hitting the center. I want you to practice hitting the toe. And you know what? And a week later, they come back and they say, I love golf. I
Right.
haven't shanked it since. Or maybe, oh, I had a brain fart on the 13th tee and I shanked one, but I went straight back to your drill, didn't shank it for the rest of the round. And you know what? A year later, they come back. I've had people sometimes where I'm like, shit, where is that person? I thought that was a good lesson. And then I contact them and I say, are you okay? And they're like, yeah, I haven't needed to come back. I'm like, well, shit, this is a crappy business model for me. But luckily I make sales on the back end from big video products and stuff like that. But yeah, my sales model, or my business model is not very good because I make players better and able to self-coach to the point they don't want to come back. They don't need to come back.
Ken, his book is called The Practice Manual, The Ultimate Golfer's Guide.
Ultimate guide for golfers. Yeah, anything like that will go in. Yeah, it's
Ultimate
pink.
Guide, yeah, Ultimate
purple. Guide for golfers.
And
it is a thick manual. It's like 400 pages long. We go through a lot of what we talk about in here. And then I have, if you're more interested in videos, I have videos that have those visuals that we see. It's like 3 hours of content basically, and I show you more drills or ways of developing these things. I do talk about the technical aspects as well, but it's more for intellectual stimulation than anything, because again, I show you all the complexity that's involved mechanically, and I just say, these simple drills are basically the way to go.
And Steve said that he loves your nail drill to hit a slight draw instead of a slice. Said he still comes over the top trying to hit the nail even when he imagines it on the inside of the ball. Obviously, I'd be a terrible carpenter.
I think a lot of that, it's down to process. And I would get players so the nail drill for people listening is you've got the ball and you've got a nail driven through it. I actually, hammered a nail through a golf ball and I just angle it more to the right or to the left. So someone tends to swing to the left, they're over the top. I will angle that nail more to the right and just say, how would you hammer that nail? And then people are tapping into instinct. And as long as the process is good, you see immediate results with that. So I start out with little putting swings, then build it up to chipping swings, then full swings. If you go straight into a full speed swing, you might revert back to the old way. But as long as that process is in place, and there's no end to how much you can angle that nail to the right. I had a player the other day who was struggling. We were angling it 5-10 degrees to the right, and he still was coming over the top of it. It was better, but not where we wanted it. So I just went extreme. I just angled that nail like almost 90 degrees to the right. And I said, how would you hammer that? And he did his swing and he said, oh my God, that felt horrible.
Right.
And I played the video back because I had my iPhone out. I played the video back to him and I said, that looks like a tour player. It feels horrible to you, but it looks like a tour player right now. And that just lit the TrackMan up. It says 0 for path. So sometimes feel is not real and we have to exaggerate things initially. As many people trying here, if they try, the first time they try and move it towards the toe or the heel, it won't budge. I can guarantee you that. But like I said, start with chip swings or putt swings at first. Go extreme. Instead of thinking hit a little bit off the toe, try and toe shank it. And you'll see it doesn't move as much as you think it would. And then over time, you basically grease the wheel, I call it, and you improve your ability to move it. Like the first time I tried, I couldn't move it. But now, years later, I can actually make a backswing, have someone call out in the middle of my backswing, toe or heel, and I can change it. Now, you obviously don't need to get it to that stage. It's not really functional to have it to that ability. I just do it to kind of partly show off and partly show that this is what can happen if you practice these things enough. Not only can you move it at will, you can change it mid-swing potentially.
That's awesome. Any final questions, guys? It's almost been an hour here, so I want to be appreciative of everyone's time. I think for me, man, this was awesome. I think we've seen people in the comments saying how they think about. Roy was mentioning how he's thinking about impact differently. I think a lot of people, even if they might even know about skill versus technique. I think we often need reminders. It's funny because when I watch like some videos where they're talking to pros and they're asking them stuff, it's funny. Like some of them will just be like, I pick out like a leaf on a tree and I'm aiming for that. And that's all I'm thinking about. You know what I mean? It's like, there is no like all these different things that are going on in their heads. They're thinking about a result, a task, as you said, and not worried about positions.
You can get two types. I mean, I would say 90% of tall players fall into the I'm doing it, but I haven't got a clue how I'm doing it. Just like we are with walking, right? The act of walking is incredibly complex. If you were to try and explain the mechanics of walking, do you land on your heel? Do you land on your toe? When do you bend your leg? When do you bend your ankle? We don't know, but we're all experts at walking, and that's what pros are. You do have the guys like Bryson DeChambeau. They might be able to tell you about forces and torques and things, but that's quite rare to have that. And in fact, many pros in an attempt to get better at the game of golf, they go down this mechanical road and they actually fall off.
They get worse.
There are more stories of that than there are, say, Nick Faldo-esque stories of rebuilding your swing and going on to win in 6 majors. So there are both sides of the spectrum, definitely. But I would even say don't see this as an either or. Right? Don't see it as skill or technique. Oh, I can only work on one. No, you can work on both. Right. You could work on how pretty your swing is if you want. But at the end of the day, you could have the prettiest swing in the world. And if you're not striking that yellow spot on the ground, it is not going to work. I can guarantee you. In fact, I posted a video of Rory McIlroy the other day. It was a video where he topped the ball. And every single part of his swing looked brilliant. He had a toe level grip. Toe level backswing, top of the swing was toe level, shift down was great, impact position looked good in terms of like body orientations, follow through was nice and balanced, yet he topped it. So it's like, why? Because he didn't hit that spot on the ground.
Right.
So it's like, yes, you can work on the swing, but ultimately the function of your shot, whether that shot is good or bad, is going to be, did you hit that spot in the right place? Did you hit the center of the face? Did you, was the face presented more open or closed? Those are the big three, basically.
Right. Jeff said he can't wait for his divot board. Pierre said you keep it simple, like to focus on task more, and he's going to invest in your book. Real quick, guys, I sent everyone an email. I sent everybody an email who signed up for this event. Adam was giving away some bonuses that you guys can sign up for. Definitely do that so you guys can keep in touch with Adam and what he's doing. And you can find him at adamyounggolf.com as well. I had a great time, everyone, and feel free to reach out to me with any questions if you need to. And I appreciate all of you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. Hopefully you got something.
Great. All right, guys. Have a good one.
Cool. All right. I'll speak to you later. Bye.
All right. Take care, Adam. Thanks for coming.
No problem. Bye.